You're in the shower, somewhere between rinsing your hair and standing there for 11 straight minutes, and you've already argued with someone who has no idea they've upset you. Or you're on the highway, and somewhere past the second exit you've just delivered the sharpest, most perfectly timed comeback to something your boss said in a meeting 3 weeks ago. Everyone in that imaginary room is stunned into silence. Then a horn blares. You snap back. And you realize you've been drifting at 47 in the fast lane wearing the face of someone who just won an Oscar. If that hit a little too close, good. Because there's a mental pattern that barely gets talked about honestly. Not the everybody zones out sometimes thing. That's not this. This is something that stops being a habit and starts being a place you live in. And it stays hidden because the people going through it are usually the last to think anything's wrong. From inside, it doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like relief. So what's happening in the brain? There's a network called the default mode network. It switches on when you disengage from the outside world. The moment your attention drifts, this network takes over and starts producing you, your memories, your fears, your fantasies, the arguments you never got to finish, the futures you keep rehearsing. That's its normal job. But for some people, this network doesn't just switch on now and then. It becomes the default channel. The brain starts rating the imagined world as more rewarding than the actual one. And once that flip happens, reality starts to feel dull, thin, undercooked by comparison. Dr. Eli Summer, a clinical psychologist at the University of Haifa, gave this pattern a name back in 2002, maladaptive daydreaming. The label doesn't fully capture the experience, but it's the closest framework we've got. What he found wasn't simple distraction. People were losing hours, sometimes most of their waking day, inside fully built internal worlds, recurring characters, plot lines that ran for years. And nearly everyone shared one thing. The fantasy gave them something reality hadn't. Not escapism in the lazy sense, like dodging responsibility. More that the daydream handed them control, emotional closure, or a kind of safe connection real relationships never quite delivered. You can replay a conversation, edit it, finally get the other person to understand, something the real version of them never managed. Sounds like a solid workaround, right? Here's where it turns. The brain learns that emotional needs can be satisfied internally. And once that lesson sticks, stepping back into the mess of real life starts to feel worse than just staying inside your head. Real people are unpredictable. Real conversations go off script. Intimacy is slow and uncertain and occasionally humiliating. The daydream never lets you down like that, so you keep returning to it. This has nothing to do with being creative in the way people assume. Plenty of highly imaginative people never do this. Plenty of people who've never written a sentence of fiction do it compulsively, daily. It's not about intelligence either. What the research does point to is absorption, the trait tied to getting completely swallowed by an experience. It's the same trait behind people who get wrecked by a song or can't shake a movie for days. They feel things at full volume, so they built a room where they could feel it entirely on their own terms. Then comes the part that actually does damage, the shame loop. You're 30 minutes deep into finally saying, at last, what you couldn't say at 14. And some quiet part of you knows time is slipping by. You know the real world hasn't paused for you. Coming back out leaves this strange residue, hard to name, easy to feel. And before you've even decided to, you're halfway back in again. Shame feeds the pull. The pull deepens the habit. The habit eats more and more of the space your actual life was supposed to occupy. None of that makes it a character flaw. The people who build this pattern are, statistically, people who once needed an exit that the real world simply didn't offer. Maybe home wasn't safe. Maybe they were lonely in places that were supposed to feel warm. Maybe they were just wired a little too sensitively for the environment they grew up in. And this was the least destructive coping mechanism their nervous system could invent. So the daydream wasn't the problem. It was the fix for something else. The real question isn't whether you do this. It's whether it's still working for you, or whether it started charging you rent. Now stop here for a second. The instinct, once people recognize themselves in this, is to want to shut the inner world down completely. But that's not what the research supports. And honestly, it doesn't hold up psychologically either. The goal was never to become someone who stops disappearing into their head. It's to figure out what that disappearing is actually giving you, and then start, slowly, clumsily, building pieces of that into your real life. What's the imagined connection offering that you're not asking for out loud? What's the fantasy resolution giving you that you're too scared to actually chase? What is that rehearsed scenario preparing you to live that you haven't dared to yet? Being able to construct entire worlds in your head with emotional depth and characters that feel alive, that's not a small thing. That's a genuinely rare capability. Most people carrying this pattern are sitting on a huge reserve of internal richness that just never found the right outlet, the right person, or the right moment of safety in the real world. The real tragedy was never that they imagined too much. It's that somewhere along the line, they learned depth was only safe when nobody could see it. If you watched all the way through and felt that specific, quiet recognition, not, interesting, but the kind where you have to consciously remember to breathe, here's the thing. Nothing about you needs fixing. You adapted, quietly, on your own, in a way nobody clocked and nobody credited. Most people doing this don't even realize they're doing it. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.